Here's a review for The Last of Us Season 2. The show finished its second season on Max a few weeks ago. It just took some time to get a review together with the summer movie season starting to take effect and all the reviews I had to work on. But better late than never. This is the second season of the show based on the acclaimed Naughty Dog video games. The first season was based on the first game, retroactively called The Last of Us Part 1. And a lot of what made that season great was the same things that made the first game a great experience. A totally f***ed up world with no rules, thanks to flesh-eating zombie type things running amok. But at the core was the father-daughter bond that formed between Joel and Ellie. Even with all the great show direction at hand here, the show's strength was Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey working great in the roles. In my eyes, they did a legendarily great job with season 1 of this show. But the question, of course, immediately after was how the f*** were they going to deal with season 2? That second game is not as beloved as the first game for various creative decisions. When I experienced the second game when it came out, I was very much put off by a lot of the story direction and a lot of other weird stuff. But there was still great gameplay, horror, and continued showcase of a world gone to hell. But from an adaptation standpoint, the second game was going to be tough to pull off because of its length and unorthodox story structure. But even with my reservations about the second game, I was still glued to my TV every Sunday at 6 p.m. to see how this adaptation of the second season would play out. In this season, the vengeance and fallout for Joel's decisions at the Fireflies Hospital puts Ellie on a unique character journey for vengeance and peace. That's my vague tiptoeing around the obvious spoilers about this show. I'm going to talk about the show in its entirety, but per usual, I'm going to avoid mentioning any direct story spoilers. So I'll say this now, that this was a much more pleasant viewing experience than my initial experience with the second game. That's because with that game, that was of course the first time experiencing that story, and a lot of where that anger came out as far as the direction they took the story. Contrastly, watching season 2, the obvious things knowing about how things would play out in terms of the major story beats, the intrigue was seeing how the story would be adapted, but there wasn't really any anger involved in that. But it's a testament to some still continued great show filmmaking performances that I was still able to feel some similar emotions to how I experienced the opening of the second game. It was still sad to see the initial state here of Joel and Ellie's relationship after the heights their bond reached in season 1. Pedro Pascal was still amazing as Joel. That was great casting and amazing work by him in 2 seasons of this show. Much of the way you feel about Joel is because of how he feels about Ellie. And on that topic, Ellie is a bit more of a mixed bag. When I look at how the initial scenes played out, she was definitely on the brattier side here compared to how Ellie was in the second game. I still think Bella Ramsey is good and a lot of times still great in the role. But some of the initial issues that Ellie isn't as visually aged as she was in the second game. But that's just a problem with doing this in live action, I guess. She did look a little older, so at least there's that. The casting I found to be much more problematic was Abby, the second game's primary new character and essentially second protagonist. Here in season 2, she's played by Caitlin Denver, who performance-wise I thought was fine. But it's odd casting because the thing that stands out immediately about Abby from the second game is her size. The girl is built, looking like a goddamn bodybuilder, and it adds to the level of intimidation to the character. Even though with how the story plays out, there's nothing that says she has to be played by a big woman, but it's just weird that you would do casting that just completely ignores all of that. But no matter what anyone thinks about the casting, performances, or little changes here and there, the thing that was undeniably great about season 2 was episode 2. It was a sensational episode in so many ways. From an action perspective, it was incredible with this amazing imagery of hundreds of infected attacking the fort, and the action that went along with it was thoroughly entertaining. They made much better use of the bloater here in this scene than the entirety of season 1. The setting also of the Blizzard environment just looked great, but it featured the core sequence that was the emotional tipping point of the show, where Joel, Ellie, and Abby's stories all intersect. It wasn't a 100% recreation of the scene from the game, but it nailed like 90% of what it needed to be highly effective. But for obvious reasons, if you're watching this show because of Papa Pedro, this is where the show is likely going to lose you, and likely where it lost a lot of its audiences who never played the games before. If you had played the game before, you know there's just no getting around what happens. I think the problem with the rest of the season after that is that you lose the great part of season 1, which is obviously that great duo that Joel and Ellie became, and are now watching a vengeance story with characters that aren't always the easiest to attach yourself to. Even if I mostly still like them, Isabel Merced was good as Dina, and her and Ellie worked nice together. The action, specifically the infected scenes, are still fun, but the story is fairly meandering without a whole lot of worthwhile development. The episode that'll pique everyone's interest, whether you've played the game or not, is the episode later in the season that features Joel and Ellie together again. The two characters and actors are at their best when they're together, and it made for a beautifully touching episode. The episode did have the weirdest creative change for me, and that's how the reveal was handled of Ellie finding out the truth behind the major event at the end of season 1. It's not exactly what I would have done, mainly because it would have allowed them to do another episode with Joel, but it was effective in how it was character-based and played well into the story that was naturally playing out. But by the time you get to the end of season 2, it's not going to be that satisfactory a viewing experience from a story perspective, based on how the season ends. This is where the original game's length is a major factor, as you couldn't do it complete justice with just one season. It's one hell of a cliffhanger if you don't know what happens next. For reasons similar to the actual game, I didn't 100% love The Last of Us Season 2. It was always watchable, albeit not special, save for a few episodes which were exceptional, and there were some other great moments here and there. In the big picture, I'ma slide it right in the middle between meh and I liked it. If you've only seen season 1 of this show, you're likely going to hate season 2 in the big picture, but if you've experienced the story in its entirety through both games, there's some fun to seeing what creatively is done here, most of which I thought was fine, but I know it's going to bug the shit out of some people. But I think this show is going to have a hell of a time pulling off the rest of this game's story, and more importantly, it's going to put those actors, specifically those actresses, through hell, mainly with all the internet harassment that's already happened to them. Sometimes the internet is as f***ed up and cruel as the actual world of The Last of Us, even if some of the trolling was kind of funny though. So that'll do it for this review of The Last of Us Season 2. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching.
You swore